Today I'm going to showcase one of the strongest builds for Warlocks in Destiny 2 right now. So while the light subclass build has been taking up many of the recent headlines, this Stasis build with Osmiomancy Gloves still remains as one of the best builds for Warlocks going into endgame content like Grandmaster Nightfalls, raids and dungeons. Today I'm going to show you the Stasis setup plus the combination of weapons, armour and mods so you can get through to that endgame content nice and easy in Destiny 2. Well, if you're new around here or find this useful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below for all the latest Destiny 2 content and turn on notifications by hitting that bell, and roughly 98% of viewers who watch This Week in Video Games aren't subscribed. So subscribe today and never miss an update. Well, let's get right to that important information and check out the build, and first of all, we've got the Stasis setup. For my super, I'm using Winter's Wrath. For my grenade, it's a Cold Snap grenade, and my melee is Penumbral Blast, and my class ability is a Healing Rift. For my aspects, I'm using Bleak Watcher, so press and hold the grenade button to convert your grenade into a stasis turret that fires flame projectiles at nearby targets. And then I'm using Glacial Harvest, so freezing targets create stasis shards around the frozen targets, and higher tier combatants create more shards. For my fragments, I'm using Whisper of Fissures, so increase damage in the size of the burst of stasis when you destroy a stasis crystal or defeat a frozen target. Whisper of Bombs, so defeating a frozen target grants you super energy. Whisper of Shards, shattering a stasis crystal temporarily boosts your grenade's recharge rate, and shattering additional stasis crystals increases the duration of that benefit. Finally, Whisper of Rhyme, so collecting a stasis shard grants a small amount of overshield which falls off after 10 seconds. Collecting additional shards adds to the overshield and refreshes the timer. Next up, let's have a look at the exotic armour, so the Osmiomancy Gloves. And Osmiomancy Gloves are exotic Warlock Gauntlets, and they come with the perk Fervid Cold Snap. So your Cold Snap grenades have an additional charge that recharges quicker on direct impact, and the Seeker spawn from Cold Snap grenades travels further. To get these gloves, you want to check out the Legend or the Master Lost Sector solo when it's Arms Day. Next up, let's have a look at the weapons. So in the kinetic slot, I'm using Perseus D. Perseus D is a legendary kinetic scout rifle that's a high impact frame, meaning it's slow firing and it's high damage. The weapon is more accurate when stationary and you're aiming down the sights. So a good one for this is Rapid Hit and Vorpal Weapon. So with Rapid Hit, rapid precision hits temporarily increase stability and reload speed, and Vorpal Weapon get increased damage against bosses, vehicles and guardians that are super active. Well, there's two reasons I'm using this one. So it fires stasis damage, so it's really good with the stasis subclass for the build, and also it's good for champions this season when paired up with anti-barrier champion mod. Next up, in the energy slot, I'm using the Vex MYTHOCLAST. This one comes with the perks Timeless MYTHOCLAST, so the weapon fires full auto when it's in its default firing mode, and Temporal Unlimiter, so defeating targets builds stacks of overcharge. Swap firing modes with fully overcharged, and in alternate firing mode, you hold the trigger to charge up and fire a more powerful linear fusion rifle shot. So really powerful this one, and definitely a really good thing to have in your arsenal. You can get this one from the Voltaglass raid from the boss at the end, and that is Atheon. Do be aware though, it is a really super rare drop. In the power slot, I'm using Chain of Command. This is a useful machine gun that comes with a good selection of perks, so Adrenaline Junkie, Demolitionist, Osmosis or Adaptive Munitions. I'm going for Adrenaline Junkie and Demolitionist given the grenade focus of the build. Demolitionist in particular is good because kills with a weapon generate grenade energy. Also, this is another stasis weapon, so really good for that stasis build as it pairs with the stasis subclass. Next up, let's have a look at the mods. So Elemental Ordnance, defeating combatant when a grenade spawns an elemental well that matches your subclass energy type. Bountiful Wells, elemental well mods that cause you to spawn elemental wells now stack, spawning additional wells for each additional copy of the mod you have equipped. Font of Might, so picking up an elemental well that matches your subclass energy type grants a temporary bonus to weapon damage. Elemental Shards, so stasis shards count as elemental wells and doesn't apply to Crucible Trials or Iron Banner. Then I've got Distribution, reduces all ability cooldowns when using your class ability near targets. And then finally, Anti-Barrier Scout Rifle and Overload Machine Guns. Well, next up, let's have a look at the gameplay loop for the build. So this build is focused on controlling the battlefield, and Stasis is one of the best choices for this, because you can deploy all kinds of tools to freeze enemies in place. One of the main components of the build here is the Osmiomancy Gloves. and these give us a second cold snap grenade, which is almost returned immediately when you get a direct hit with a grenade. I'm going to pair this up with Bleak Watcher, and Bleak Watcher is where you convert your grenade into a stasis turret that fires slowing projectiles at nearby targets. That means you can throw one grenade to create a turret to control the battlefield, and another grenade can be kept for slowing enemies. Now, given the amount of control we have over enemies here, this is going to be really useful in endgame content like Grandmaster Nightfalls raids and dungeons. It's going to make your life a hell of a lot easier if you're trying to solo a dungeon, or if you're on a Grandmaster Nightfall with a fire team, keeping champions or other dangerous enemies like wyverns, for example. Keeping them back and frozen in place is just going to help out everybody. Supporting the main focus for the build, the Osmiomancy Gloves, so we want to make sure we're getting as much grenade energy back as possible, plus powering up our damage output via elemental wells. For example, if you have a Demolitionist perk on your kinetic or power weapon, that's really going to help. Demolitionist is going to give us grenade energy when you get kills with a weapon. Also, if you are throwing grenades, you're creating elemental wells with those grenades, and when you pick up those, you're going to activate Font of Might, meaning a 20% bonus to weapon damage. Given the Fervid Cold Snap perk on the Osmiomancy Gloves, a direct hit with a grenade means almost instant respawn. So if you can connect with your grenades, then you can chain them together one after the other. Weapons for the build are put together based on the champion mods for the season, and also the stasis damage type. For example, this week's Nightfall had barrier and overload champions. Therefore, I'm using an overload machine gun, so that's my chain of command in the power slot. That is also a stasis weapon. I'm also using the Perseus D to help take care of barrier champions with the anti-barrier scout rifle. So in the energy slot, I'm using Vex MYTHOCLAST. That has the sheer power to overwhelm most enemies. Plus you've got the rapid fire nature of an auto rifle, but it's a fusion rifle. And you've got that alternate firing mode of the linear fusion rifle for the big damage. In almost all situations, it can overpower enemies, sometimes even unstoppable champions and overload champions too. Anti-barrier champions are a little bit more difficult. But if you're able to use the Vex MYTHOCLAST, then I would, as it gives the build a nice fire and ice feeling to it. If you don't have this one, another exotic energy weapon you enjoy using would be just fine. The weapons here are down to personal preference and what activities you were doing at the time. And given the build is based around grenades, stasis, and the Osmiomancy Gloves. Finally, we've got the mods. So as mentioned, I'm using elemental well mods to trigger Font of Might, but there's also something in here I don't really use a lot with other subclass 3.0 builds. That is because it's a stasis specific mod, and that is elemental shards. This is where stasis shards count as stasis elemental wells for you. This works really well with the Aspect Glacial Harvest, where when freezing targets it creates stasis shards around the frozen targets. Higher tier combatants create more shards. It's going to be great in Nightfall content when you've got a lot of higher tier enemies. Plus you've got Whisper of Rhyme, so collecting a stasis shard grants a small amount of overshield that falls off after 10 seconds, and collecting additional shards adds to the overshield and refreshes the timer. Again, this overshield is going to be really valuable in endgame content to give you that extra protection. Well, let me know in the comments what you think of the build, and let me know if you've got any improvements. Well, that is it for this Warlock Stasis build with the Osmiomancy Gloves in Destiny 2. And as always, thank you so much for watching. For more Destiny 2 content like this, hit that subscribe button down below and subscribe to This Week in Video Games. Or you can check me out on Twitter at TWIVG Podcast. Enjoyed this video, found it useful, liking and sharing the video would really help me out. Otherwise, check out the other videos on the channel. Well, thanks again, and I'll see you soon.